Customer threw money at my face, then bank president asked why he's assaulting his loan officer. What if the worst humiliation of your life was the catalyst for your greatest success? Hey, my name is Alice. I never imagined it would happen to me. I never thought I would find myself standing in a crowded bank, surrounded by people who had always looked at me as just a loan officer, a small, inconsequential cog in their well-oiled machine. But there I was, trying to hold my tears in check. As a customer I had worked tirelessly to assist, threw a wad of cash at my face, calling me worthless. His words echoed in my mind, harsh and unforgiving. You're nothing but a failure. Do you even know what it's like to struggle? And with that, he stormed out, leaving me to stand there humiliated, broken, and questioning everything I had worked for. But just as I was about to crumble into the shame I had carried with me for so long, something unexpected happened. The bank president, someone I had always feared, walked into the room. He saw the scene, the turmoil, and instead of sweeping it under the rug like I had always expected, he did something that would change my life forever. Why is he assaulting his loan officer? The president asked, in a tone that carried authority, but also concern. At that moment, everything changed. The humiliation that had once felt suffocating was now a burning fire inside me, one that I could no longer ignore. How had I allowed myself to be pushed down for so long? How had I let people, like that customer, define my worth? I didn't have the answers then, but I knew this was a turning point. Would I let this moment break me, or would I take control of my own story? Would this be the event that sparked the courage I had buried deep within? I didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. This customer's cruel treatment would be the last time I allowed myself to be diminished. I was done being invisible, done letting others decide my value. This moment would be the catalyst for change in my life. I could feel it deep within me. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The bank president's question hung in the air as the room grew silent. I stood there, breathless, as I realized something profound. In that moment of humiliation, I had been given a chance not just to survive, but to rise above everything that had held me back. But how would I take that chance? Would I rise or fall? In the aftermath, I would discover that the greatest power comes not from the people who push us down, but from our ability to stand back up. The journey to reclaiming my own worth wasn't as simple as a single act of humiliation or a sudden decision to take control. The truth was, that moment in the bank, while transformative, wasn't the first time I had been made to feel invisible. In fact, I had spent years in the shadows, swallowed up by the expectations of others, slowly losing pieces of myself without even realizing it. As a child, I had always been the one to blend into the background. My parents, both hardworking professionals, were consumed by their own lives, leaving me to fend for myself emotionally. I can remember the quiet evenings, sitting alone at the kitchen table, my mom and dad at either end, silently eating their dinners. No words, no conversation, just the clink of silverware and the occasional sigh. My sister, always the star of the show, would demand attention, while I quietly disappeared into my own world. I learned early on that my needs didn't matter, that my emotions weren't worth the time or energy. It wasn't just at home. In school, I was the quiet, studious one, the girl who never raised her hand too high, who always waited for others to speak first. I was the one who got the best grades, but never the accolades. Teachers praised me for my work, but I was never the one they singled out for my leadership or my personality. I was the reliable student, the dependable one, but I was never the standout. I often wondered why people never saw me, never truly looked at me. It wasn't just neglect. It felt like a deliberate oversight, a quiet form of rejection I never knew how to fight. That feeling of being overlooked carried over into my adult life. As I entered the workforce, I found myself stuck in roles that made me feel like I wasn't really making a difference. I had the right qualifications, the right experience, but I was never given the opportunity to shine. In meetings, my ideas would go unheard, while others' louder, more charismatic voices took the credit for my work. I would smile and nod, pretending not to mind, but inside, I was burning with frustration. It was in those years that I first noticed the subtle, almost invisible ways that people dismissed me. It wasn't just at work, it was in relationships, too. I had friends who, when I needed support, were often too busy to be there. Boyfriends who promised the world but could never deliver. It was as if my life had been built around this invisible wall, a barrier that kept me just out of reach from the things I truly wanted. I tried to push through it, tried to show up, to be seen, but the harder I tried, the more I realized that no one was looking. And no one seemed to care. The pain wasn't just in the big betrayals, it was in the small, everyday moments. The times I was passed over for promotions, the colleagues who ignored my contributions, the friends who never checked in on me. It was the constant, silent rejection that was so much harder to bear than outright criticism. I had spent so many years fighting for attention that I started to believe I wasn't worthy of it. The emotional scarring built slowly, layer by layer, until I was a shell of the person I could have been. The quiet wounds, the ones no one could see, began to define me. And so, when that customer threw money at my face, it wasn't just about the insult, it was a reminder of all the times I had been made to feel worthless. It was as if every painful moment from my past had rushed to the surface in that instant. I had spent so much of my life trying to please people, trying to be someone I wasn't, just to be seen. But here I was, reduced to a pawn in someone else's game. It was hard to admit to myself, but that moment was the culmination of everything I had internalized over the years. The humiliation didn't just come from the customer. It came from the years of feeling small, ignored, and unseen. I had let myself be defined by the way others saw me, and I had allowed that to shape the way I saw myself. It had been so easy to bury those feelings, to push them down and pretend they didn't hurt, but they did. And now, they were all coming to the surface. As I stood there in that bank, trying to maintain some semblance of composure, I realized that the first step to healing would be acknowledging those wounds. Not just the ones inflicted by others, but the ones I had allowed to fester inside me. I had spent so long trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be, that I had lost touch with who I really was. Would I continue to let those small betrayals define me, or would I finally confront them? Could I face the pain of all those years of rejection and move forward, or would I let it hold me back forever? For the first time, I understood that in order to move forward, I had to first understand the depth of what I had been through. The hurt wasn't just a moment, it was a collection of moments, each one building on the last, creating a silent narrative in my mind that had dictated how I saw myself. But now, I was ready to change that narrative. I didn't know how, but I knew I was done being defined by the invisible scars that had shaped me for so long. I was ready to take control of my own story, no longer a victim of my past, but a creator of my future. The days following that humiliating incident at the bank were a blur. A whirlwind of emotions that seemed to swirl around me, consuming me entirely. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The way the customer had thrown money at me, the sneer on his face as he insulted me, the way everyone in that room had just watched. I had felt so small, so invisible, and yet, a part of me knew that something inside me had shifted in that moment. I had been humiliated, yes, but I was also alive. The pain was sharp, but it was also a reminder that I could still feel, still fight. For days, I tried to push those feelings aside. I returned to work, put on my professional mask, and tried to act like nothing had happened. But I couldn't ignore the weight of it anymore. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't drowning in the quiet, unacknowledged pain I had been carrying for so long. The rejection, the years of feeling like I was just a background character in my own life. The thing about humiliation is that it strips away the layers of denial we've built around ourselves. It forces us to see the truth, whether we want to or not. I had spent so many years avoiding the truth that I had been letting people walk all over me, that I had allowed myself to become invisible in the pursuit of acceptance. And now, standing at the precipice of this moment, I realized that if I didn't do something about it, I would never be able to reclaim my life. It wasn't just about the customer's disrespect. It was about the years of quiet suffering I had allowed to accumulate. The pattern was there, right in front of me. Every time I was passed over for a promotion, every time someone ignored my ideas, every time I didn't speak up when I should have, those were the small betrayals that had made me feel like I didn't matter. I had been a passive participant in my own story, letting life happen to me, instead of taking control and writing my own narrative. But now, I was done. I was done playing small. I was done being the quiet one in the corner, the one who was always overlooked, always underestimated. The humiliating incident with the customer had forced me to face the reality of my situation, and for the first time, I didn't want to stay silent anymore. I didn't want to keep allowing other people's perceptions of me to define who I was. The decision was made. I would take control of my life. I would no longer allow myself to be invisible. I wasn't sure how I would do it, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I began with small steps. The next day at work, I walked into the office with a newfound sense of determination. I wasn't going to be the quiet, apologetic Alice anymore. I wasn't going to be the one who shied away from difficult conversations. I wasn't going to be the one who let others walk all over me. It was time to stand up. For myself, it wasn't easy. There were moments when I wanted to shrink back into my old, familiar role. But every time that voice in my head told me to stay quiet, I pushed back harder. I made myself speak up in meetings, even if my voice trembled. I made myself take credit for the work I had done, even if it felt uncomfortable. I made myself stop apologizing for things I didn't need to apologize for. I was reclaiming my power, piece by piece. But there were other battles I had to face. The hardest one was within myself. It was the voice of self-doubt, the voice that told me I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy of respect. That voice had been there for so long, ingrained in me from years of feeling overlooked and dismissed. It was a battle I had to fight every single day. One afternoon, I sat in my office, staring at my computer screen. I had just received an email from my boss asking for an update on a project I had been working on for weeks. The old me would have immediately responded with a quick, apologetic answer, explaining that I was doing my best. But instead, I took a deep breath and composed a message that was clear and assertive. I told him that the project was on track and that I was confident it would meet the deadline. As I hit send, I felt a strange sense of pride. It wasn't about the project. It was about the fact that I had stood up for myself. I had stopped minimizing my contributions. I had stopped being afraid of speaking my truth. The next few weeks were a blur of change. I started taking on more responsibility at work, pushing myself to grow and challenge myself in ways I never had before. And with every step I took, the confidence I had been lacking began to build. I no longer cringed when I had to speak in front of others. I no longer second-guessed myself. I had found my voice, and I was using it. But there were still moments of doubt. Moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was being too bold or too assertive. But then I remembered the customer who had thrown money at me. I remembered the humiliation I had felt, but also the way it had propelled me into action. It was a moment I would never forget, a moment that had sparked something deep within me. I wasn't just reacting to that one incident anymore. I was creating a new version of myself, one that refused to be silenced. I was taking control of my narrative, one decision at a time. It wasn't enough to simply stand up for myself. It wasn't enough to just show up, to demand recognition in the workplace. No, something had shifted inside me after that incident with the customer. I could feel it, a stirring deep inside that called me to act, not just passively stand my ground, but to challenge the systems that had belittled me for so long. I had spent years taking a back seat, waiting for recognition, waiting for someone to notice my contributions. But that had been my mistake. The humiliation I had suffered, the years of being ignored, had ignited a fire in me. I realized that the only way to truly reclaim my worth was to go beyond merely surviving. In this world of corporate facades, I needed to do more than just play the game. I needed to change it. My plan wasn't going to be some loud, impulsive confrontation. No, I had spent far too much time being underestimated, being treated like I didn't matter. This time, my revenge would be calculated. It would be subtle, strategic, and most importantly, it would be something that no one could ignore. It would be a reckoning. I began by carefully assessing the landscape around me, the very environment that had allowed the customer's disrespect, the years of unnoticed work, and the suffocating expectations of others to thrive. This wasn't just about the bank where I worked. This was about the larger world of corporate culture that operated on status, hierarchy, and the constant undermining of anyone not at the top. I had the skills. I had the knowledge. But most importantly, I now had a clear sense of what had been done to me and what I would no longer tolerate. My first task was simple: get noticed. I needed to make an impact in a way that would make everyone sit up and take notice. I was no longer going to be the woman in the background, hiding my ideas for fear of rejection. I started by taking control of the smallest things. In meetings, I stopped waiting for permission to speak. I began presenting my ideas as if I were already in a leadership role, making sure that my contributions were clear and well-structured. When someone interrupted, I didn't shrink back. I interrupted right back, politely but firmly. It felt empowering to assert myself, but it wasn't enough. I had to make them feel my presence, in every room, at every table, in every conversation. Then, I turned my focus to the larger scheme: my ambitions. For years, I had dreamed of running my own tech startup. The idea had always been there, but I had been too afraid to take the plunge. I had convinced myself that I wasn't ready, that I didn't have enough experience, that I wasn't worth the risk. But now, I realized that the only thing stopping me was my own fear. The world had treated me like I didn't belong in the spotlight. Well, it was time for me to prove them wrong. I knew that starting a company would be no easy feat. I needed to find a niche place where I could shine. And that's when the idea hit me. I had spent years working in banking, learning the ins and outs of finance, technology, and data security. It was time to take those skills and create a platform that would disrupt the industry. The tech world was still male-dominated, and I saw an opening for a new type of financial service, one that could empower individuals and businesses alike. It would use artificial intelligence to provide personalized financial solutions. That would have made my own work as a loan officer far more efficient. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. I spent every waking hour researching, drafting business plans, and reaching out to people who could help me. I reached out to tech developers, consultants, and investors, people I had once been too afraid to talk to, people I had once felt unworthy to approach. I realized that I had more power than I had ever given myself credit for. The respect, the recognition, it wouldn't come from waiting for permission. It would come from taking what I deserved. But there was a catch. In order to truly make an impact, I needed something more than just a good idea, needed a story. And that story would have to be personal. It would have to showcase not just the brilliance of the business model, but the tenacity of the woman behind it. I had to show the world that I wasn't just a banker with a vision, but someone who had fought for her place in the world. I had to expose my past struggles, the customer's insult, the years of silent suffering, the quiet moments of rejection. But I also had to show how I had turned those experiences into the very fuel for my ambition. I began preparing a pitch for investors, not just about the company I was building, but about the woman who had built it. I wasn't going to be shy about sharing my story. I wasn't going to hide behind professionalism or modesty anymore. It was time to reveal the strength behind my actions. I knew that in order to succeed, I needed to convince people of my worth. And that meant showing them not just what I was capable of, but who I truly was, someone who had faced humiliation, betrayal, and failure, but had refused to let it define her. This wasn't just about financial success. It was about proving to myself that I could rise from the ashes of my past and create something that would last. The final piece of my plan was to give the bank, where I worked, one last taste of what they had overlooked. I wasn't going to just walk away quietly, unnoticed. I was going to leave with a bang, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The world needed to know who I was. I began preparing for the meeting with the investors, refining my pitch, gathering my resources, and making sure everything was in place. I was no longer afraid of rejection. In fact, I welcomed it. Rejection meant I was pushing the boundaries. Rejection meant I was making a difference. As I prepared for the next step in my journey, I couldn't help but think about the moment I had been thrown money at in the bank. It was no longer just a moment of humiliation. It was the catalyst that had set everything in motion. It was the spark that had ignited a fire I could no longer ignore. I was ready. Ready to take control of my future. Ready to build something that would change everything. And I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. But when I walked into that boardroom, everything shifted. I had been dreaming of this moment for months, planning every detail down to the finest point. The anger, the humiliation, everything I'd carried for so long was about to be unleashed, and I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I had been preparing for this day ever since the incident with the customer. The moment he threw that money in my face, like I was some sort of joke. I had been humiliated in front of my peers, my colleagues, the ones who were supposed to respect me. It wasn't just about the physical act. It was the slap to my dignity, the way they stood there and did nothing. My heart was still racing as I walked to the front of the room, where the investors sat, eyes fixated on me. This was my chance, my moment to take back control. I set the folder on the table in front of me. The business plan was meticulously crafted, every detail of my tech startup polished. But that wasn't what I wanted to lead with. No, what I had to say was far more personal. I cleared my throat. Before we get into the details of the numbers and projections, I want to tell you a bit about myself, about why I'm here, and why this project means more to me than anything I've ever done. The room shifted. I could see their eyes narrow slightly. The curiosity was palpable, but I knew they weren't expecting what came next. I continued. You see, not so long ago, I was humiliated in front of my colleagues, in front of customers, thrown out like I was disposable, like I didn't matter. And the worst part was none of them cared. Not my boss, not anyone. I was just a tool for them to use when it suited them. But I've spent months since that day, building something, for myself, something that's mine. This isn't just about making money or getting a quick investment. This is about me taking control of my life, my worth. About showing everyone that I'm not the same woman I was when I first walked into this room. I paused. The silence in the room was thick, like the weight of my words was hanging in the air. They weren't just hearing my pitch anymore, they were hearing my story. I'm here today because of all the people who doubted me, all the ones who made me feel small. I'm here today because I'm done with being overlooked and dismissed. I'm not asking for validation, I'm taking it. I'm here to take control of my future. The tension in the room grew. I could feel the eyes of the investors piercing through me, but now it didn't matter. It was time for them to see me as I truly was, not a victim, but a woman with vision, with power, with ambition. I'm not just a loan officer. I'm not just a cog in the machine. I'm a founder, an entrepreneur, a person with a dream. And I've got the skills to back it up. This business is my fight for everything I've been denied. I'm asking for more than money today. I'm asking for your belief in me. I'm asking for your investment in my future. I could see them now, their expressions changing, the realization dawning that this was more than just a pitch. It was a reckoning. There was a brief silence before one of the investors, a woman who had been silent up until this point, spoke. That's a powerful story, Alice. But what I want to know is, can you make this happen? I nodded, feeling the fire inside me ignite even further. I've already started, I said, my voice firm. I've built the foundations of this company with the same resilience and determination that has gotten me through my darkest moments. And now, I'm ready to take it to the next level. With or without your help. I was no longer asking for permission. I was staking my claim. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. The room was quiet again, but this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant. They were waiting, considering the woman in front of them, not just the business proposal. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, the bank president spoke. Alice, I'll be honest, I didn't expect this, but I respect it. You've got guts. And I think you have what it takes. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the validation I had been seeking for years, it was something deeper. Something more meaningful. You've got our attention, he continued, looking at the others around the table. We'll talk terms, but I'm in. I blinked, feeling the weight of his words sink in. It wasn't just a business deal, which a declaration of my worth. The long road of humiliation, of being ignored and dismissed, was finally coming to an end. And I wasn't just going to accept what was given to me anymore. I was going to take it. As the meeting wrapped up, I walked out of the boardroom with my head held higher than it ever had been before. I had made it. Not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who had finally reclaimed her power. But I wasn't done, not yet. I had one final decision to make. It wasn't just about this deal, or the success of my startup, it was about the next chapter of my life. And I knew one thing for sure, this time, I would write it on my own terms.